Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 39 with Tyler Lloyd. Cool conversation with another fellow podcaster. He is the host of the podcast My Peace Corps Story, and also was involved in the production side of a sort of cocktail podcast called Speaking Easy. So definitely check both of those out in the show notes. But Tyler's a really cool guy, just super nice. Really, it was cool hearing more about his background and the work that he's doing right now with his podcast as well as his day job. But just really appreciate you listening. I appreciate Tyler making the time for this show. And after this brief message from our sponsor, this is episode number 39 with Tyler Lloyd. This episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast is brought to you by Top Hat, the teaching app that makes active learning come to life. Top Hat helps thousands of professors create their perfect course. Our app is easy to use and allows you to engage your class, adopt next-generation textbooks, and run tests, all within a secure digital environment. See why faculty in over 700 colleges and universities across North America trust Top Hat to power their classrooms. Visit tophat.com/higheredgeek. That's tophat.com/higheredgeek. I'm not in we're kind of coming down from our busy period at work, and it was just random stuff coming up and other side projects, and I was just I just don't want to do the episode and be super frazzled or just 'cause I hadn't eaten anything either I was just today I was losing the battle with that day in particular, but today's going a little smoother, as jam-packed as it is. So I'm excited to finally dig in and talk a little bit here. I know you have kind of diverse and varied interests, and I'm excited to dig into it. So yes, we'll go ahead and get started. So if you want to introduce yourself and kind of just give a Cliff Notes version of your professional journey and how you got to be where you are today.
Well, my name is Tyler Lloyd. I currently live in Washington, D.C. I'm a federal employee working for the United States Environmental Protection Agency. I grew up in Kentucky in a somewhat rural setting outside of a large town. Spent my summers growing vegetables, selling at farmers markets, a lot of time outside catching bugs and exploring nature, which led me to studying biology, and then pursuing environmental science and environmental policy. And along the way, I did some traveling, first in undergrad for study abroad in Australia, and then I served in Burkina Faso as a Peace Corps volunteer for 2 years. In between my years at grad school, I sort of sandwiched Peace Corps service in between 2 years of grad school at Indiana University. And then ended up landing a job at EPA. And that sort of brings us to present. There's, as anyone's story goes, there's a lot more details in there, but that is the Cliff Notes version of my life.
Yeah, it's just always summarizing it in a few minutes, but that is well done. And we'll dig into a couple of pieces here. So, thinking back to, undergraduate Tyler, what do you feel your college experience specifically when you were in undergrad, what did that give you personally? You mentioned study abroad and those things, what did that give you personally and or professionally that still resonates today?
Well, I would say one thing that surprises people when they meet present day Tyler is that I was in a fraternity. I was in a very large, well-known fraternity, Pi Kappa Alpha, and depending where you went to school, you might cringe at the name because you may have negative connotations with the chapter that was on your campus. But I do not regret the time that I spent with an amazing group of guys, and I think it really developed me as a leader. And it's not something that I ever considered doing when I went into school. I was sort of a textbook nerd growing up, not exactly fraternity material, but I dove into it for I don't know what reasons exactly, but I think it really fostered me as a leader, shaped my voice and gave me a lot of confidence in who I became. So that's, I guess, one unexpected thing from my undergrad that people, whenever it comes up, they can't believe, like, wait, you were in a fraternity? It's like, well, not only was I in a fraternity, I went to all the national leadership conferences and conventions. I was vice president, led recruitment. I was in it, and I would say that I'm proud of my time as an active member of that fraternity. So that's, I guess, one thing that pops up in my mind when you prompt that question.
Yeah. Well, I guess you have the experience that, like, as somebody who works in higher ed, like, that's what I would hope and imagine students get out of that experience. Because, yeah, like, there's a lot of stereotypes or sort of, like, bad reputations about certain things. If it's just like, oh, just like a bunch of people party together all the time and, like, just goofing off or whatever. But it's like, it has the capacity for being such a catalyst for leadership growth and teamwork and, just a lot of skill building. And, you had mentioned, like, feeling like it was a way that you stepped out of your comfort zone a lot. So it's like, they have a place, and as long as they are being responsible and guided by, kind of devoted professionals to help sort of scaffold their growth and development and all that. I'm glad you had such a kind of transformative experience with your fraternity, and that sort of setting you on the path that you're on. I know you work on a couple of different things in addition to your day job, like a podcast specifically. So, if it's just sort of like broadly, your current work, your current world, like, the things that you kind of fill your time with, like, what do you enjoy most about your current work? And we'll get on to some of the more geeky stuff.
Well, current day-to-day work at EPA. So my title is an environmental protection specialist, which is not the sexiest title in the world. But what I like to tell people that I do is that I help regulate chemical substances. So that's what I do. Work on a wide range of chemicals, and it's a government agency. And as such, I would like to make the caveat that I do not speak for the EPA. I'm not a representative of the EPA. I'm coming on here in my public capacity, and probably prefer to stay away from work stuff. We've been in the news enough, but I happen to fill my time outside of EPA pretty well. I'm doing podcasting. I've got one current podcast called My Peace Corps Story, where I talk to current and return volunteers about their Peace Corps service. And that sort of stemmed out of a book that I wrote about my Peace Corps service. And then before that podcast, I had another pretty successful show with two friends all about home bartending and cocktails, something that I knew absolutely nothing about. And even after 2 years, I would say I know just marginally more about the subject matter. But they were the host of the show, and I was the guy that did all the web design, social media, promotion, recording, editing, all the non-sexy stuff. But that's what I like. I like creating in the sort of digital space, be it videos, podcast, websites, photography. I've always been a tinkerer on a computer. As much as I love the outdoors, I can become lost in a screen and spend hours upon hours editing something, making something, or just goofing off.
Oh. Yeah, well, you've mentioned it a few times. I feel like, you've just got that, like, kind of nerdy, geeky core that kind of manifests in different ways. And and I guess just to clarify, like, if somebody was interested, because it sounds like it'd be fairly evergreen content, can people still find that old podcast that you worked on somewhere on the interwebs?
Yeah, it's called Speaking Easy Podcast. It's on speakingeasypodcast.com. It's on still all the major platforms. I'm still paying for the hosting for it because it is good. We produced 106 episodes, one a week for 2 years. A wide array of content. Got rave reviews, had a good following. But as things go, after doing it week in and week out for 2 years, it's kind of like, well, what are we doing here? And I would say that, like most groups that break up, we had some creative differences in where we wanted to take the project. I was, because I love this sort of creation and figuring out, in the digital space of like, well, now we have this product. Can we monetize it? Can we write more content that we could then, publish and sell? Because then still while we were towards the end of it, that's when I published my book. And I wanted to, really try to turn it into a brand and a business. And the other guys just, they were, I guess I would call them purists. They liked making cocktails, hanging out, and that's fun too. I liked it too. But then that sort of comes it runs its course over so long.
Right. Yeah. That's always tough. Yeah, because I think it's like if you get to those sort of decision points, it's like, okay, are we just going to keep doing this in perpetuity? And then like if you were trying to grow it, like what would be sort of required of us in terms of time commitment, resources, and those sort of things. So it's like, yeah, just I'm sure some of it to some people, whether it's subconscious or not, like, or conscious, like if they're very apparent where it's like, no, I'm not willing to take this risk or put in the investment. And to other people's, it might be subconscious where they're just like, yeah, if they're just kind of being purist about it or just, like, no, I'm okay with just how it's always been and I'm fine doing that forever, or I've done enough as a purist, like I don't need it to be any more than it is or something. Yeah, it's like complicated. Yeah, with that creative stuff, I've certainly, been there. And sometimes like I imagine, I guess for you, like the itch comes back if like, you're working on this show for a while, it ended, and then you're like, you know what, I'm just going to do my own show. Cause like that's where I was at, before I started this one, stopped for a while, came back, wanted to do my own thing. But, so yeah, we'll make sure to link out to all that stuff. But, so I guess you already mentioned, I guess, just your nerdy personality and, some of your interest from like schooling and, doing this like creative work and stuff. But I guess anything else sort of like kind of thematically that you geek out about. And I guess if you want to, recommend specific things, we always like to make space for that as well. But yeah, like what are you geeking out about currently? Is it anything new that you've discovered recently or stuff that you've always been into for a long time?
Been trying to get back into photography. It's just trying to find the time for it, and I always geek out about that. Ever since I got my first camera, this little dinky point and shoot, I think in middle school, that I saved up for it after selling vegetables all summer at the farmer's market, and definitely don't take the greatest pictures. Sometimes I try to be artistic, and it's just sad. But that's one thing that I'm geeking out about, and then bicycling. Actually, I don't do it enough. I just moved to an apartment where it's now really easy for me to walk to work, and I get to walk across the National Mall and through these little gardens. So I end up walking much more now than I've been biking. But I spent, I guess, the first 2 years in DC. My Saturdays were spent at farmers markets because that's how I grew up, and I guess I just gravitate towards farmers markets. But not being a farmer and growing anything in the city, I sort of met up with this guy, and he was fixing bikes at the farmers market, and I joined him. And then for every single Saturday, as long as the market was open, we fixed bicycles in the community for free. People could give us a donation if they wanted to. But it was a wide range of clientele, which was pretty interesting. You had these people that would come with these, gorgeous, beautiful $3,000 and $4,000 bicycles, something that I'll probably never own myself or be able to justify. And I got to work on them and like learn them and tinker with them. And they would, throw us $20, $40 as a sort of a tip and a donation, which was great because we used those to buy supplies and tools and different things. But then a lot of that money sort of went to subsidize some of the people that would come with their bicycle that was this rundown, held together with like duct tape and a prayer bicycle. But like that was their way of getting to work. They were on the very, very different end of the economic spectrum. And it was so amazing to be able to fix their bike, that, okay, I just helped someone get to work next week. And that was, something that I absolutely loved and felt very rewarding because, working a 9-to-5 job in an office, sometimes it's very hard to see the fruits of my labor and don't get to do a lot with my hands and create, even when I'm creating online, I get to make a pretty web page, but you can't touch it. You can't feel it. But it was so rewarding to fix a bicycle and see someone, ride off on the thing that you just made work, which was, really cool. So I geek out about that stuff and trying to find ways to tinker. But since moving to a different apartment, now I'm like a 45-minute bike ride from that farmer's market, and I haven't decided yet if I want to commit to an hour-and-a-half commute every single Saturday to continue to do that. So I'm on the hunt for other opportunities where I can use my hands and do some good.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, because just that idea of like how our hobbies can positively contribute to our lives, like you're saying, like working with your hands and having these, creative endeavors that you're pursuing, like it's just, giving a lot to you personally, but then like, doing that and like working on people's bikes, like you said, it could just be like, oh, you're helping this person with their own hobby that is fulfilling and nourishing in their lives, but also like these people who, if they can't make it to work, they're losing their job, and it's like, crucial to their well-being. So it's just like a hugely, beneficial thing, just like, doing that, which it's like, like I'd probably tinker with stuff anyway. So it's like, I might as well, help people while I'm at it. I'm curious too, just to like bring back a thread from before of like you mentioning, doing your own podcast, that being a hobby of yours. So like, you mentioned how, helping to repair people's bikes and stuff was a hobby, that has been, kind of meaningful and positively contributing to your life and others. But, maybe with the podcast, that's something that you decided to kind of venture out and do on your own. How is a hobby like that positively contributing to your life right now?
Well, for one thing, at least for the My Peace Corps story, I kind of get this constant reminder of how amazing of an opportunity I had to serve in the Peace Corps and the experiences that I had there. For any informative experience, for those who are listening who have never done something like the Peace Corps, you've done something in your life where you kind of walked away and you're like, man, I feel changed from that, be it a week-long trip abroad somewhere, maybe you're on a mission trip or some sort of service opportunity, and you walk away and you feel just changed. Your mindset, you want to do things differently in your day-to-day life. But a lot of those experiences, you tend to then, as soon as you get back to your life, you backslide into how it was before. It's really hard to make those changes stick and to carry that energy. It sort of, dies out once the fuel's removed from it, which was that experience. The flame burns itself out. But I have this benefit of with this podcast that I'm talking to people who, are reflecting back on their service and, remembering all the highs and the lows. You do look back a little bit with rose-colored glasses, but there are millions of difficulties along the way. And I have this opportunity where I get to remember my service and have this constant reminder of, oh, yeah, I said I was going to do this differently, or I was going to change my life this way, and I was going to be more connected to my community and this and that. And that's one of the biggest things sort of rewarding for me. And I mean, as you know, with your podcast, I just have an opportunity to talk to people that I never would have otherwise talked to, who have amazing stories, interesting life experiences. And it's just this really cool opportunity, especially in, today's world, that if I didn't have this podcast, I probably wouldn't talk to, this is sad, like anybody who wasn't outside of my routine life. I talk to my girlfriend who I live with, and I would go to work and talk to my colleagues, and there's the normal people that you see at, the grocery store, and you kind of interact with them, and you've got your friends, and that's it. Like, rarely do we have these new people come into our lives on a routine basis that we just sit down to listen and talk, and just talk openly and explore it. And I think that that is a skill that I'm trying to get better at. I'm always not the best active listener and interviewer, as some of my reviews and fellow fans have pointed out. They've given me some love. I'm up to, I think, 54 reviews on iTunes with a 5 stars overall. So it's not doing bad, but they do give me some honest criticism that I can be a little bit awkward. I don't follow up as well. But what an opportunity to be able to have those experiences and talk to people like that, because I don't think most of us have that. So those are some of the things that I'm getting and growing with doing this podcast. And then once people know you have a podcast, you've probably experienced this, like, oh, well, I've got this idea for a podcast. I've always wanted to do a podcast. How do you start a podcast? And I will gladly, like, okay, let's set aside some time, 30 minutes, an hour, and I will just brain dump. I will send you a bunch of links, tell you, like, this is the equipment that I use, this is how I do it, this is how you should structure it. And I don't think anybody has ever taken me up on it. And actually, like, we maybe had the conversation, but I don't think they've ever started their own podcast. But I'm always willing to let people know, like, okay, it's not that hard. I've got a $60 microphone and a 7-year-old laptop. You can make it work and make it sound good and make it interesting with not a lot of money. So that's another thing that I'm building the skill set that I'm ready to teach someone else, if I can just find the right person, the willing student, to take this information and do something with it. Because maybe they'll create a podcast that'll be amazing and change the world, or it'll just be really funny and people will like it. But that'll still change the world too.
Yeah. I definitely get that a lot too. Yeah. And I think, I've seen some, kind of eggs that I've helped to hatch, and they've grown on to be their own cool things. And because that's part of what I love about the medium is it is so accessible. And I mean, there's so many platforms now that are, but certainly something about the spoken word directly in your ear, which is, certainly really enjoyable, and just, I think, able to be a little bit more long form than, like if you're like a YouTuber or something. But and I guess just like you're saying, I mean, like, you personally grow from it, from just like, the like helpful constructive criticism of listeners. And, I've certainly, been doing this for several years between different shows. And I think I'm not getting any formal kind of education on this kind of stuff, but I've learned a lot just by doing it, and sharing, great stories, and, seeing that people are enjoying them. And like I said, it continues to resonate for you, the power of the Peace Corps experience, and, hopefully other folks, the folks that you're talking to are, allowing that to, sort of like you're saying, almost like that metaphor of like keeping that fire going, even in just like the, sort of smallest sense. Because if it gets, extinguished, it might be hard to sort of restart that kind of spirit that you might have. And if you can keep that going for, any number of other people, it's always a good thing. So,
and it's always nice when the people, come on the show, and as they're sort of preparing, and I send them out some questions, and like, these are the things I'm going to talk about. So many times they'll be like, well, as I was preparing for the show, I pulled out my journals, my diaries, and I was reading through them, and I was remembering all these things that I forgot about, and they have all these stories that are just coming up that, if it wasn't for this goofy guy with a podcast, they probably wouldn't have taken the time to really reflect back on their service. So it gives me just this little opportunity, one person at a time, to allow them a chance to remember what they did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very cool. Well, I'm always curious, especially for, obviously pretty much all the people we have on the show are just like geeky people, but especially other like geeky creators. I'm curious if there's anything that specifically you are reading, watching, and or listening to. Could be any or all of those categories, but any particular pieces of content that are grabbing your attention lately that we could include in the show notes.
Well, I am taking, I guess, it's always, you're always hesitant to talk about something that you just got into, that you're just exploring. It's like, I cannot speak with any bit of authority on this, but I'm just finished, I guess, 2 nights ago, my very first graphic novel. It's of an 8-volume series. I'm now just started the second one last night, called Saga. And I've never read any graphic novels, but so far from reading this one, they're awesome. And just seeing the artwork and the imagery and the storyline going on there, because I'm trying to get better at reading, because I spend a lot of time at work reading things that interest me but are on a more of a policy legal stance, very technical, and I want to still read, but by the time I get home, the idea of, cracking open a normal book is like, I don't really want to stare at a lot of, black words on a white page. I definitely don't want to tackle anything that you would maybe consider to be like intellectual. I kind of want to turn my brain off or use my brain in a different way. So I'm trying to get into more reading in general. So I've started now exploring graphic novels as a way to read. It's definitely not the densest stuff, but it is so captivating of how you meld, the visual art and capture it all, and just this, I don't know, these little techniques of how they structure it and the different panes. And it's like watching an amazing movie, and it's so cool too, because as you're seeing it, it's like watching a movie, but you're giving them, like every other minute of it. And you get to let your imagination sort of fill in the gaps. So you get to create your own little nuance of how you create the scene in your imagination. At least that's how my mind works. So I've really been enjoying that and geeking out on graphic novels as of the past week and a half.
No, yeah, that's great. I mean, and I think like I've been reading some stuff about how like comic books and stuff are, I think, they're lagging behind the kind of continued, and I think we've certainly reached peak TV, and we're kind of riding it down from that, that peak. But, comic books have lagged behind that a little bit because it's, as many other things are, it's, the two big players, DC and Marvel, and, some other independent folks. But, they're almost like pushing people to movies and TV too well. People aren't reading the actual core material. But then, like, my understanding of something like Saga, I believe, is from one of the independent publishers, but there's so many great stories, and like, if you want more of like a visual element, that medium is certainly experiencing its own sort of like, and again, this is my impression because similarly, it's not something that I've delved super deep into, but I know people that are like, publishing their own graphic novels, and just like they're independent artists and just creating their art and sharing it out with the world and self-publishing, if it's digital or paper or whatever. And it's just another platform to tell great stories just in a different way. And, it's because I tend to get, at least maybe a couple of times a year, like, especially as like gifts and stuff, people will give me different like trade paperbacks of like Spider-Man or something. Cause like, yes, I will consume any and all like Spider-Man stuff that I can get my hands on. Yeah, I'm glad that you are enjoying that Saga series so far. So we'll include that in the show notes if folks want to kind of follow along with you. But we will wrap up the episode here on our classic optimistic note. So what is something or things that you are looking forward to in your job, life, and or the world? So it can be any of those categories or all of those categories if you want to go to like each of them or but just something that you're looking forward to.
Well, I just moved into a new apartment as of 2 weeks ago, maybe we're on week 3 right now. And I have a space within my apartment, our den, where I've got a desk actually set up. So this is the first time in many, many years where I actually have a formal space, rather than just putting my laptop on a kitchen table or sitting it on the floor while I'm creating and doing stuff. This is the first time in a very, very long time, maybe since undergrad, where I've had a desk. I've always been creating and doing stuff, but it's been in a very sort of nomadic, haphazard sense. So I'm really excited to have a desk, to have a space, and hopefully that'll cause me to be a little bit more creative and start to do more rather than coming home and I have a space where I can sort of start to train myself to put down my backpack, maybe eat, but then go sit down in a workspace and condition myself to start using that more. So that's one thing that I'm really excited about. And I am living with my girlfriend now, so she is my new roommate. Excited about that as we've been decorating our apartment. And figuring out the nuances of living with one another, our likes and dislikes that you don't get to know about unless you actually live with a person. All those little minor things. So excited about my desk, my new roommate, and there's actually a lot of up and coming opportunities with my outside projects that I can't speak about just yet, but I am very excited for them. It seems like after years of work, it seems like it might be paying off. But I think a lot of people always feel like maybe it's always about to it's always about to pay off. But I think now I'm a little bit closer, and being able to have some pretty cool opportunities given all the work that I've done for free on my own free time, just because I love and enjoy it. And maybe it'll actually turn into some actual income, which would be cool. And so very, very excited for that as well. And then I'll have this lovely new desk space to work at to earn those dollars. But even if it doesn't, I still like the creating. I'm not doing it to make money. And just something to do.
Yeah. Well, because that's what I love highlighting in this show is just the way that people's sort of side projects and hobbies and things can be fulfilling, even if it's not income. It's just a way to keep busy, a way to work with our hands, a way to just contribute something to the world. Because sometimes it's if you were maybe this is a tip of the hat to the purists or something from your previous show, but sometimes if you're trying to monetize something, it can kind of tarnish it. But on the other hand, like you're saying, if there's something that you're working on that could only really fully realize its potential by getting the resources to augment it and grow it or whatever, it's yes, let's go for it. And me, I've been podcasting for a long time, and I'm just now getting to the point where it's starting to get some return. But it's if nothing else, I can sleep soundly at night that I know I've not been wasting my time, because it's there's a bunch of people listening that I know are enjoying it and they tell me so. And it's cool. All right. I can stake my claim on that. And it's but it is my creative efforts are worth something. So, hopefully I can kind of, subsidize it a little bit. But besides all of that, I think it definitely connects with me. I just moved into this apartment, 6 months ago as of the recording of this episode. And it is just wild how much a different physical space can have such a positive impact, where it's just if you kind of go with the feng shui kind of thing, like you're saying, it's a dedicated workspace to really be productive and to kind of separate that and close it off if you're just trying to relax, or, if you just need privacy or whatever. It's just dedicated space. Cause I have a space now that I continue to try to retrofit to be, a positive space to record and to do all the other stuff that I work on, and, just not feel like I'm being in the way or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, obviously for a lot of the stuff that you mentioned, the details about, this new living arrangement, a lot of different positive aspects to it for you. So happy to hear that is something that you're looking forward to kind of continually blossoming for you. All good stuff that we've talked about here. Appreciate you sharing all that you did. And like I said, we'll include everything that we talked about in this episode in the show notes. So just really appreciate your time, and just have a good rest of your week.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and hopefully we can keep the conversation going, not on the podcast, as, we're both sort of dabbling in this creation space. If ever we can, exchange tips and tricks and support one another in various ways, always willing to lend some time to a fellow creator like yourself. So hopefully this doesn't end when we hang up on this Skype call.
No, yeah. I mean, I always appreciate talking shop. So I'm sure this will not be the last time. And I appreciate you making yourself available. And best of luck with everything. And I guess I'll talk to you again soon. This podcast is a proud member of the Connect EDU podcast network, bringing together diverse voices and thoughtful discussions to the higher ed community. Check us out online at connectedu.network or on Twitter at connectedupod. Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast.